Welcome back, Florida Politics Now. Happy 250th birthday, America. It's great to be with you and with our panel here. Let's start patriotic. We're going to give you a story right off the bat about a replica of the Liberty Bell that's now in Florida, but there's a news angle here too. Let's go ahead and roll that first story. Really recounted our nation's history. Many folks who would have seen this bell in person, well, back then they weren't quite sure whether our country's sun was rising or perhaps setting. The bell is the exact replica of the Liberty Bell found at Independence Hall. Governor DeSantis said both the United States and Florida have what he called a legacy of freedom. But within the first few minutes of his remarks, the governor said the Supreme Court got it wrong when they found the Constitution does provide for most anyone born here to be a citizen. The governor making some news in response to our question, saying Florida should lead the charge in calling for a constitutional convention to overturn the Supreme Court. But he cautioned that will be nearly an impossible task.
So we're already leading the efforts for an Article 5 convention for both term limits for members of Congress as well as for federal balanced budget requirement. So I obviously would be supportive of that. I think the chance of doing that is probably less likely to get done.
The governor says he's giving state workers a 4-day weekend for America's 250th birthday. The unveiling drew quite a crowd here in rural Liberty County, with several people telling us they were thrilled the governor even attended.
There's a lot of things that can get your blood boiling, I get it, but taking a step back, I wouldn't want to be any other place. And the reason why I can say that is because they laid the foundation 250 years ago.
Now, the state is also providing some freebies. If you can't make it out to see the Bell State Parks free for America's 250th birthday, feel free to go out and support wherever you are. For now, in Liberty County, I'm Matt Hoffman. And I'll also just add that I think everyone who lives in Liberty County might have been there, minus a handful of people. So that was a really fun event to see everyone. Let's go ahead and open it up to our great panel for any questions.
Matt, I'll start. Jessica Foster here at WJHG. When the governor made those remarks, what was the sentiment from the crowd?
Yeah, I don't think they were expecting perhaps the history lesson that they got. The governor kind of acted as a professor, going through the whole history in the Liberty Bell and Independence Hall. I don't know that they were expecting that. There wasn't any kind of huge audible reaction. I think there's sort of two parts. There's the unveiling of the bell, which is just a really fun event for the community. And then there's the news side of it regarding the SCOTUS ruling. And so I don't think they necessarily knew those two things were going to be matched, but everyone just seemed happy that he was even there.
You think that Ron DeSantis is pretty much just laying the groundwork for some sort of presidential run?
I think that's a distinct possibility. He's been doing some of these sort of history type lessons also on his X account, used to be Twitter. He's putting out different statements and he's been opining on many different topics. I think that's definitely a possibility. It struck me that he was the one delivering the bell. You know, in other circumstances, you might see a lesser cabinet official do something like that. You might see the lieutenant governor do something like that, who's in his own race. You might see the Secretary of State who was there, but definitely took note that it was the governor himself on this holiday week, the one to unveil the bell and immediately launch into criticizing the Supreme Court.
Do you get a sense from lawmakers what kind of appetite there is for repealing birthright citizenship in Florida? I know it's a state full of immigrants, but obviously the majority of Republicans, at least publicly in the state, have the birth tourism concept has been one that they've been fighting against. Any sense of, obviously most Republicans seem to be disappointed with the ruling, but what sense do you have from the Capitol?
Yeah, it's hard to get an exact feel. This is mostly the governor floating out this idea of a constitutional convention. It would take a lot, as you heard the governor say. There's different ways to call the convention, but you need 2/3 of both the House and the Senate, and then you need 3/4 of the states to agree to repeal it. So I don't know that it'll be such an ideological, do we or do we not want to do this? They may simply be looking at practically, if we did do this, do we have any chance of success? And so it might be less about the policy and more about just the efficiency of trying to do something that large. You know, the Constitution's only been amended few more than a couple dozen times.
Are you getting any kind of feel from, residents of Florida, how they feel about this? And is that partly driving Ron DeSantis?
Yeah, it has been a complete mix. The reaction, we get a lot of our reactions from comments online. You publish the story and then you see how people react. The reactions have been all across the board. You have immigrant rights groups criticizing the governor, supporting the birthright citizenship decision. You have a lot, especially Republican elected officials, to Jacob's point, criticizing the decision. It's really the gambit. You mentioned earlier the immigrant population in Florida, especially in some of our cities that have universities and colleges. Well, that is something to keep in mind too, that the constituency isn't always so simple as Republicans and Democrats, but different subgroups within that. And so the reaction has been completely mixed, which I think was what we saw throughout the whole country.
And it really was interesting that he took that opportunity to say something when he was presenting the Liberty Bell, and also in a country, or in a state rather, that is made up of so many immigrants.
I definitely took note. When we decide to go out to these things, Liberty County, about an hour from where we're sitting in Tallahassee, you're always wondering, is it going to just be kind of what I would call a ribbon cutting or an unveiling, just a basic, hey, this is a really nice event. It's America's 250th birthday. Let's just do something fun for the 4th of July. And he really launched into this criticism unprompted. I think the switch was really fast from him. You saw that clip, him taking the tarp off the bell and then launching into that unprompted. Certainly something I took note of. And to your other question, I'm not sure the crowd was expecting that. By the end, we were back to the greatness of America and this legacy of freedom. But it's definitely noteworthy that he took this opportunity in particular to go off on the Supreme Court.
Of course, they unveiled recently a statue of Abraham Lincoln elsewhere. And of course, there's been a number of these unveilings throughout the year. Matt, do you happen to know if they're going to continue this in various counties even after the 4th?
Yes, the governor said that they would be continuing to rotate some of these statues through. Right now, there's a Ponce de Leon statue at the Capitol. If you go in there on the first floor, you can see it. I suspect that will be rotated perhaps somewhere here in Leon County. There's also a statue of George Washington right now in the Capitol. That could go Washington County, Washington High School. Perhaps the governor mentioned that he's been buying these statues on the cheap. And so that's kind of the whole purpose of rotating them into the Capitol and rotating them out. So I think we will see more of it, and especially if it draws a crowd. Liberty County is, I believe, Florida's smallest county, or at least up there. And so to draw quite the crowd for that, I would imagine any politician would take that opportunity in the future.
And just wanted to confirm, Matt, the bell did not have a crack in it, and it doesn't ring.
There's no crack. A gentleman on a motorcycle came by after the big crowds you saw were gone, and he laughed and he said to us, there's one thing we don't like, and we're sitting there just talking and doing the story, and we're like, what? And he got out with his finger and drew the crack line. So there's no crack. But I guess it's the closest you can get without that. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. We'll come back for our second story from the week. Welcome back, Florida Politics Now, back for the second half of our show. I want to switch gears from what was America's 250th birthday celebration to a really serious topic, and that is the rise of these AI lawsuits. Of course, here we check the court docket every day, the state and the federal courts, and it feels like every week there's another lawsuit involving AI. Let's go ahead and take a look at that story.
Problem, according to independent lawyers we've spoken with, neither Congress or folks here at the State House have passed any overarching AI laws, and so that leaves judges to interpret ancient principles as they apply to new technology. In a June lawsuit, FSU student Aliana Grant alleged ChatGPT rushed its model out to the public in order to beat Google to the punch. Her lawyer says that was negligent.
You're talking about an absolutely gorgeous 21-year-old girl who walks out of class and doesn't even know what hit her. All of a sudden, she feels something hit her in her chest. She sees blood coming out of her hand. She runs to safety. She makes eye contact with the shooter, and he's pointing his gun as he's pulling the trigger right at her.
An independent expert we spoke with said the latest suit is unusual in that Sam Altman, the CEO, is named personally.
In here they've alleged that basically Altman and OpenAI got wind of what Google was up to, and then they started to take steps to advance their product, maybe at the risk of some of their safety procedures and protocols. So it'll be interesting.
This month's suit is another in a long list filed against ChatGPT, including a criminal investigation by Florida's Attorney General.
Or if the system wasn't set up in the right way to counteract what the shooter's thoughts were. We don't know exactly what their failure is yet, but we know there's multiple failures.
OpenAI has responded with generally the same statement after each lawsuit. It reads in part, quote, "Last year's mass shooting at Florida State University was a tragedy, but ChatGPT is not responsible for this terrible crime. After learning of the incident, we identified an account believed to be associated with the suspect and proactively shared this information with law enforcement. We continue to cooperate with authorities." OpenAI has not yet had the chance to formally respond in court. Right now, the lawsuit is in state court, but it could be moved to federal court in the future. Of course, we'll keep an eye on it for you. For now, at the Capitol, I'm Matt Hoffman.
And yeah, as you heard in that story, just the latest in a long list, I should say, of OpenAI and AI lawsuits we've covered. Let's go ahead and open up any questions you may have from your neck of the woods.
Of course, this is the first state lawsuit against OpenAI ChatGPT, and that really seems to lend a greater heft to the legal challenge to OpenAI. Do you know much about the discussions going on in Tallahassee before they decided to go ahead, and what made them, go ahead and then file that suit?
Yeah, and one key point on that also is that this lawsuit seems to be building off the facts of the previous lawsuit. So the first federal lawsuit seemed to start with general allegations, and then the second one builds off of that, and so on and so on. And so this is, I think, and this is my opinion and not news, but my opinion that this is the most detailed lawsuit we've seen so far. I did ask Lee Paris, you heard from him there. He's the independent lawyer who is not affiliated with the case, about the merits of state court versus federal court. He said there is a good chance it gets removed to federal court because OpenAI is a California company, and so they have an argument to be made that they shouldn't be brought into Florida state court. But he also mentioned that the federal court can be a lot faster. So if they go that track, this case could come to a conclusion much sooner. Obviously, courts here in Leon County at the circuit, they have hundreds of cases for each judge, and so there's definitely some weight back and forth. And I'll just make one final point on that. We'll add in that the alleged shooter, Phoenix Eichner, he's also in Leon County court, of course, on the criminal side of things. So it's been a busy time for our court system. And like I said, we check the docket every day. There's no doubt more lawsuits coming.
And Matt, is the loss? Go ahead, Jessica.
I was saying it's very interesting because artificial intelligence is progressing so fast. It's almost difficult to keep up on many fronts. I know here in the Florida Panhandle, we've had some local counties putting in bans on AI data centers coming into the area. They just don't want that. So I think this is going to be something that we continue to see evolve across our state and across the country.
There's absolutely no doubt about that. The Attorney General, for example, here in Florida has called for the legislature to do something so that counties don't have to try to, and cities don't have to try to act on their own. Huge calls for Congress to do something. Obviously, that feels like the cleanest solution, and that Congress sets the rules for the entire country. But the technology is emerging so quickly that I think lawmakers are struggling to keep up with that. And so that'll be interesting to see if these lawsuits change anything, because perhaps they're more of a direct attack than trying to legislate, trying to amend, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and piggybacking off that, I mean, AI is now at the center of this horrible tragedy that happened, 2 minutes walk from the state capitol. They have lawsuit after lawsuit now coming out, making headlines, as we've said, like seemingly every other week this summer and this past spring. I know lawmakers are now out of session, but I mean, how does this not become just one of the top talking points next session? I know the AI Bill of Rights was something they were supposed to pick up during the special session, and the House just never touched it, deferring to federal action. But it just seems like the echo chamber is going to just be louder than ever when they reconvene in 27.
Yeah, I don't see how it could not be the case. There are going to be more lawsuits. There's more lawsuits all across the country every day. Just yesterday, there was another one in California. There's a lawsuit in Canada for the shooting that occurred up there. So I don't see how it could not become a topic of the next legislative session. I would think this might be something that they negotiate on before. Obviously, you're going to have committee meetings this fall, and you're going to have some run up to the official session. I would think this is something they would try to legislate through. There definitely was an appetite to defer to Congress, because if Congress can set the rules for everyone, then that would give us all a baseline. We all know here, especially the viewers of this show, know that Congress is an extremely fractured place, and that there's not a lot of agreement on much of anything. And so I think the state legislature will certainly have to take a look at this and try to come up with some kind of guardrails for Floridians.
Yeah, of course, we're going to be having a new governor in by that next regular session. We'll have new House and Senate leaders as well. It's going to pay to watch very carefully what they may be or may not be saying about these things heading into 27.
Yeah, and we could see, I mean, the candidates themselves, they run the gamut on their thoughts. Some of the candidates say we should ban data centers, and I'm picking on data centers, but AI regulation generally, we should ban data centers. Some of the candidates say, no, that's anti-capitalistic and we should just put some kind of regulations in. And some believe that you shouldn't stifle innovation at all. And so that is going to be a huge determining factor. We're also going to have new leadership in the legislature on top of a new governor. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that all molds out, and let alone by the time you have the president and Congress weighing in.
Is it possible, and let me play devil's advocate for a moment here, that this is an easy target for state leaders or federal, to go after, deep pockets, easy target, as opposed to doing the hard work of legislating? I almost certainly that will be one of the arguments. And that's one of the problems, but that's one of the hurdles with these lawsuits. Outside of the Attorney General's investigation, which is separate, these are victims or alleged victims suing the chat bot company. In theory, if you floated out a large enough settlement amount, that might relinquish all the claims. Civil court, and this is not a bad thing, civil court is all about money, and it's all about getting justification or getting money for the things that have happened to you. And so Lee Paris, that expert we spoke to, said there's a chance a lot of these private lawsuits don't actually move the needle on these regulations because they can be dealt with money. That also dovetails into these companies. You mentioned deep pockets. They can influence this debate. They can influence Congress. They can influence state lawmakers. And so I think that AI companies are likely to say they're the
they're taking undue blame. But we'll just have to wait and see whether does this develop as a great innovation, or does this develop as big tobacco did, where there's things in the background that we don't know about that they do. And honestly, we just don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't know where AI is going to be a year from now, period.
Right.
It's just rapidly innovating and changing the way people do business and all sorts of things. It's interesting and fascinating and scary all at the same time, really.
And it's hard for the legislature or lawmakers, I'll include Congress, to keep up. Usually there's a lag between something happens and then legislation happens. Lawmakers are not known for moving at lightning speed. And so this is moving at lightning speed. And so I do wonder if there might be a situation where we do get some kind of legislation, but perhaps that's already behind the ball, that's already advanced even further. And we simply just don't know yet. And we're hoping to see more evidence come out during these court cases. A lot of these things should become public if they don't settle. And so we'll just have to wait and see what AI companies know and what they're sharing. And of course, there's plenty of benefits too. Plenty of universities are using AI to great advantage. And so it's going to be this balancing act for regulators to say, are we going to stifle this out, or are we going to put some guardrails, and how do we do all that?
And Jessica's right. Those data centers, that's something that we're all keeping an eye on in our local markets, because it's become a question for municipal and county governments to whether or not to regulate here out in the rest of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you have a county by county approach, that can be difficult because you might be incentivizing data centers to go to one county versus the next county over. And how does it all play in together? We had a story that was last week. You might have seen some advertisements like during the World Cup about data centers perhaps have benefits. Obviously, they've been a punching bag for some time. They've come out with ads saying it's not all bad. And so I do wonder if that pendulum starts to swing back, especially for our rural counties that don't have a lot of tourism going on. It must be an enticing option. But it's something right now that every county has to try to work through. That could change with the new governor. That could change with new lawmakers. We just don't know yet. All right. Thank you for joining us. Again, happy birthday, America. Enjoy the 250th. Thanks for our panel. We'll see you next time.